everybody, and Mabrika, which means welcome in Taino, to the 5th installment of All About Aphrodite. And if you see me looking off, it's because I am sitting in front of my computer, and these particular notes for this episode, which is my favorite episode, are on the computer, and there's a lot, and I was being lazy and I didn't want to write it all out. So I typed it up on the computer, and when I look off, that's what I'm doing, is I'm looking at my notes on the computer. This episode is going to be deity correspondences, which essentially are representations of the energy that Aphrodite is supposed to correspond with in other religions or spiritual belief systems. So let's get started. The first set of deities that I want to talk about are actually other Grecian deities or beings. The first I want to talk about are the Furies. And the reason I want to bring them up is because they were also born of Uranus's severed member, whereas Aphrodite was born of the sea foam around his member. The Furies were born of the blood that came from his member after it had been severed. And they are spirits who drove men crazy, which correspond with Aphrodite because she does have this seductive kind of energy, and so there are other mythological beings that correspond with that same kind of concept. The Furies, sirens, which correspond with mermaids, selkies, which are like a woman that can turn herself into a seal, and vice versa. Like, they're not half human, half seal. They are either in human form, or when they are in the water, they are in seal form. So there's that. And there are other ones that I'll bring up in another episode, but just wanted to touch on that real quick. And they are considered by some to be Aphrodite's sisters, because again, they are also born from Uranus's severed member. But another perspective is that they are actually the negative or vengeful aspect of the goddess Aphrodite. And some food for thought that I wanted to bring up, because I did read about this, was that, there is the concept of the triple goddess, and that Aphrodite is one aspect of the triple goddess, particularly the mother aspect, because she's definitely not a virgin, and she's always depicted as young and beautiful, so she's not typically associated with the crone aspect. But you do have deities in the Greek mythology that kind of that they're what they represent kind of overlaps what Aphrodite represents. And one of those deities is Artemis. She is very strongly associated with the moon. She is the goddess of the hunt, and she can be considered the maiden aspect of the triple goddess. And then there is Athena, who is also a virgin goddess, but because she is the goddess of wisdom, she can be correlated with the crone aspect, because wisdom is typically associated with the crone. So I thought that was something interesting and worth bringing up. And as a quick aside, before I go any further, I want to make sure that it is clear that what I am doing now is expressing my opinions based off of the research that I've done. I'm not saying that I'm the end-all be-all of knowledge. I'm not saying that everything that I'm saying in this video is hard fact. So please take that with a grain of salt. I am expressing my opinion based off the studies that I've done so far. Anyway, moving right along. A lot of people know the correspondence with the Roman mythology is Venus for the goddess Aphrodite, because she is also the goddess of love and fertility. In the Norse mythology, there is the goddess Freya, who is the goddess of witchcraft, beauty, sexual independence, love, and war, and she's corresponded with the goddess Aphrodite. Freya corresponds with Friday. It's Freya's day, Friday. And Friday is also Venus's day and Aphrodite's day, so that's why there's that correlation there. In Egyptian mythology, you have the goddess Isis, who is also the goddess of witchcraft. She's the goddess of fertility, motherhood, and healing. And in Egyptian mythology, Isis and Hathor kind of overlap. Some people view that the goddess Isis and Hathor are actually one and the same. I'm not saying that they are. I know that this video may ruffle some feathers because it's going to seem like I'm implying that all of these deities are the same, and I understand that for certain individuals, each deity that I'm bringing up is distinct to them and distinct to their religion, and I respect that. But it is my personal opinion that these deities that I'm mentioning now all represent the same energy, just in different cultural contexts. Again, that's just my opinion. So in the Christian mythology, believe it or not, there are some beings that correspond with the goddess Aphrodite. First and foremost, the strongest correlation seems to be with the Archangel Gabriel, who corresponds with the planet Venus, the seven-pointed star, the rabbit, the dove, and the rose quartz, which all of those things are also associated with the goddess Aphrodite. And I've mentioned some of those things, the animals, the rabbit and the dove, as well as the crystal rose quartz correlating with Aphrodite. Then you have the Archangel Gabriel, who the name Gabriel means white in Hebrew, and the color white is associated with Aphrodite. And Gabriel is arguably one of the only female archangels. And the reason I say that that's arguable is because it is more typically believed that angels are genderless, that they are neither male or female. However, some of them do tend to depict more feminine energies over masculine energies. And because they are genderless, it really does depend on how the person who is working with them perceives them. But again, that's energy. That's not physically female. They are genderless. So the Archangel Gabriel, the planet that the Archangel Gabriel rules is the moon, which is very commonly associated with the goddess, as you may very well know by now. And the nine-pointed star, which the number 9 is associated with the goddess Aphrodite. And the spider, the snake, as well as the white peacock. The spider is a very feminine animal. The snake is also very often associated with goddesses. Some that come to mind off the top of my head would be Lilith. And then there's also, which I'm going to touch more on at the end of this video, there's also the Taino goddess Atabe. And there's the white peacock, the peacock is more often associated with Hera than it is Aphrodite. But again, there are some overlaps between the goddess Aphrodite and the goddess Hera, specifically when it comes to love and marriage. In the Catholic denomination of Christianity, there's the Virgin Mary, of course. And she is considered the mother goddess by some because she gave birth to Jesus, who a lot of Christians view as the human representation of God, that Jesus is God. So the Mesopotamian spiritual system, which includes Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian, I believe, they believe in the goddess Ishtar, Astarte. Not sure if I pronounced that right, but she is the goddess of fertility, love, war, and sex, and is commonly depicted with owls and lions by her side, which I find very interesting. I happen to have on my altar, on the goddess side, I have an owl totem, and on the god side, I have a lion totem, because for me, they represent the male and female energies, the sun and the moon, you know, positive and negative, black and white, however you want to view it. So I thought it was interesting that Ishtar was commonly depicted with both, so kind of like an all-encompassing mother deity. Then in the Sumerian belief system, there's Inanna, who is the queen of heaven, goddess of love, wisdom, war, fertility, and lust. In the Celtic mythology, you have Ainwe, which I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. I apologize if I didn't. But she is the goddess of love, fertility, healing, and sovereignty, who was originally worshipped as a sun goddess. And as some of you may or may not know, Aphrodite was originally worshipped as a sun goddess as well. And she's also associated with sovereignty. Basically, when it comes to sovereignty, that you rule yourself, you control yourself, you are responsible for yourself. And self-love is kind of tied into that, and Aphrodite definitely represents self-love. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Then there in the Irish belief system, you have Maeve, I believe is how it's pronounced. Again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. But she is the goddess of intoxication and bringer of dreams. Her themes are fairies, magic, protection, leadership, Her symbols are birds and gold, which kind of go back with Aphrodite because there are a lot of birds that correspond with her. She's also a goddess of sovereignty, fertility, personal power, and of the earth. And I thought it was also interesting to note that she was considered to be a promiscuous deity, which of course is very much the case with the goddess Aphrodite. The Welsh goddess Rhiannon is the goddess of enchantments, fertility, birds, and horses, the great queen or queen of fairies. And then her correspondence in the Gaulish tradition is Epona, who is the goddess of horses, and she inspires love, fertility, and providence in your life. There's the Slavic goddess Lada, who is the goddess of love and marriage, summer and beauty. In the Polish tradition, I'm not even going to try to say this name because I know I'm not going to get anywhere close to how it's probably supposed to be pronounced. So I'm just going to spell it. It's going to be D as in Diana, Z as in zebra, Y, D as in Diana, Z as in zebra, Ilelya, and she is the goddess of fertility, water, and women. In the Hindu tradition, you have Parvati, who is the goddess of love, fertility, and devotion. She is the gentle and nurturing aspect of the Hindu goddess Shakti, which is the divine feminine. Then you have Durga, who is the goddess of victory of good over evil, and Kali, who is the goddess of time, change, destruction, and is the fierce aspect of Durga. And Durga is Kali, Kali is Durga to a lot of who follow the Hindu faith. And although Durga and Kali are worshipped in two different forms, both Durga and Kali are representative of Shakti, that divine feminine that I mentioned earlier. In the Yoruba tradition, you have Oshun, who is the freshwater, sensuality, flirtatious, feminine sexuality, love, and fertility goddess. She's associated with Our Lady of Charity, which is an aspect of the Virgin Mary in the Catholic tradition. But the deity that corresponds more strongly with Aphrodite, in my personal opinion, is Yamaya. And her name means mother whose children are the fishes. And she is the goddess of motherhood, healing, love, and seawater, who is often depicted as a mermaid. She is the protector of sailors and associated with the goddess of Regla, who is also an aspect of the Virgin Mary. In the Persian belief system, which I believe includes Iranian, Syrian, Phoenician, and Armenian, it's Anahit or Anahita, the goddess that they revere, and she's the goddess of fertility and healing, wisdom, and more. In the Japanese tradition, you have the major kami, the goddess Inari Okami, and she is the goddess of rice, sake, fertility, tea, foxes, and kitsune, agriculture, and industry, which, of course, the fertility is strongly associated with Aphrodite, and as well as the kitsune, because again, you have this being that can turn herself into an animal, in this case specifically a fox, but that it kind of goes along with the whole seductive kind of feel that Aphrodite has. You know, the kitsune is considered a beautiful woman and, you know, seductive, just like a siren or a mermaid or any of the other beings that I've mentioned thus far. Then there's also one of the seven lucky gods, who is Benten or Benzaiten, and she is the goddess of everything that flows: water, time, words, speech, eloquence, music, and by extension, knowledge. Then you have the Chinese goddess Guanyin or Kuan Yin. Sometimes it's spelled with the G, sometimes it's spelled with the K, sometimes it's spelled with the Q, but they all mean the same Chinese deity, and she is the goddess of love and compassion. In the Aztec tradition, again, a word I'm not going to be able to pronounce. I know I'm not going to be able to pronounce it right, so I'm just going to spell it. Xoc as in cat, Hiquue, T as in Tom, Al, and she is the goddess of flowers and love, which flowers are also associated with Aphrodite. In the Etruscan tradition, you have Turan, who is the goddess of love, fertility, and vitality. In Albanian, she is Prende, the goddess of love, and whose sacred day was Friday, which corresponds with Venus and Freya and Aphrodite, whose, you know, sacred days are all Friday. The Moroccan deity is Candisa, and she's the goddess of lust, or to some, a female demon, kind of like Lilith. She is just a feminine deity. She's not necessarily a demon or a succubus or any kind. There's no negative connotations there. But the Moroccan goddess Candisa lives in the springs and rivers, and she seduces young men and drives them insane. So Does that sound familiar? In Lithuanian mythology, you have Milda, who is the goddess of love, courting, friendship, and freedom. In voodoo, you have Erzuli. She's one of the Lua, who are the spirits or goddess of the voodoo belief system. And she is the goddess of love and women. Then, last but not least, my favorite part is going to be talking about the goddess Atabe. And she is the Taino mother goddess. And she represents water as well as fertility. And motherhood, of course, because she is the mother goddess. And I do plan on starting some videos on the Taino belief system. I have been learning a lot about my ancestry, and I am extremely excited about how much I have found. It is amazing how much information there is out there. You just have to know where to look. And I mentioned it in another video that I made, which I believe is titled Puerto Rican Native Americans, Los Taínos de Borinquen. But if you don't feel like watching it, I'll go ahead and mention it now. But I have learned a lot when I found the Facebook group Taino 101. And from there, I have found other Facebook groups. I have found book recommendations. I have found websites. I have found a plethora of information regarding the Taino history, regarding their spiritual beliefs and their practices. I actually recently got in contact with a cacique by the name of Miguel, and he's wonderful. I am honored that he took the time to call me and speak with me about our ancestry and to reach out and say, hey, because you're wanting to learn, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. That's, your need for answers makes my life relevant. And for him to say something like that really just, right here, it hit me right here, like, wow, thank you. I feel welcome. I feel at home. I feel like I'm family, which is how you're supposed to feel when you are getting back to your roots. You're supposed to feel like, hey, I'm home. And that's how I feel, and it's wonderful. So if you're Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, Haitian, what have you, and you have Taino roots and you want to get back in touch with your Taino roots, you want to learn more, I highly recommend joining the group Taino 101. There is so much information there that it's overwhelming at first. So I'll try and post a link to that group in the description of this video, and I'll try to also post some other links. I do usually post my Pinterest link in the description, which if you go to my Pinterest and you look at the boards, I have a board that's Taino language with some of the words that I've learned thus far that are Taino. There's a board that's called Taino Roots, which has pins from different websites of, history and background, touches on Christopher Columbus and how he really wasn't that great of a guy. And it also touches on Atabe specifically. I have a board that's called All About Aphrodite, but since learning about Atabe and realizing that is more than likely the energy that I've been perceiving, I started a board that's called All About Aphrodite. All About Atabe, and I've been learning more about her because I feel like the dream that I had, and you can watch that video. It's the video where the images of a pink parrot. It's my parrot dream. That dream I felt like was very meaningful, and there was a message there that I needed to get. And I feel like if Atabe is trying to reach out to me, if my ancestors are trying to bring me back to my roots, then A, they're doing a good job, and B, they knew I didn't know anything about Taino spirituality or Taino culture. So I feel like maybe my ancestors reached out to me in a way that they knew I would understand, because I had done research on Greek and Egyptian deities, mostly because those are the spiritual traditions that really resonated with me, that drew me, that I couldn't explain why. But now that I've done research on Atabe and I see the correspondences, I realize that these are all representations of Atabe in the Greek and Egyptian context. So that's pretty much all I have for now. The video is over 20 minutes long. Hopefully by the time I edit it, it will be below 20 minutes, but if not, sorry. Anyway, I hope this was helpful, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to get in contact with me. You can leave me a comment or do a video response. My email can be found in the About section if you would prefer to email me. And as always, rate and subscribe,